So we're going to review the fiscal year 2024 COC APR report and go over the changes to it. We'll just walk through the entire report, and there's a new workflow for PSH that is required to complete some of the new questions. So when we get to that question, we'll take a quick detour and I'll show everybody how to do the moving on assistance workflow. Okay, so I'm gonna just start from the beginning and we'll run a report and then we'll take a look at the everything. So I'm gonna go to reports here. Fiscal year COC APR. You should have your default provider there. Made a reporting group for today. All right. We'll just do the calendar year 2023. And we'll make the type HUD. We'll build a report. Okay, so report is complete. Click on the magnifying glass. Yes.
No, if you're showing your screen, there no one can see it.
No one can see it? Oh.
No.
How about now?
You're good to go.
Okay. So yeah, ran report, calendar year 2013, 2023, HUD is a type. And so the APR that's actually in HUD site has questions that are not in this upload. The first four are just like your financial information, program information, things of that nature. And so the upload, the CSV file that comes from HMIS is what gets reported into the official reporting of a site for HUD. So that's why we need to make sure everything is accurate before we submit it, because we can't like edit anything in any of those questions or fields. So question 5 is the first question on the APR that's included from the HMIS report. And so you should have your total number of persons served for that reporting period. If you're running it for the quarter, you're going to run it from the original date, start date of the project, and then the 90 days out. So it was running this for the quarter, it would be 1/1 to 3/31, and then the next quarter would be 1/1 to 6/30, so on and so forth till you get to the end of the year. Okay, so you have your total number served, and then it's going to separate the adults and children. So you have the total number of adults, total number of children, and then total persons with unknown age, if you have any. Do you have your number of leavers that exited the program during that reporting period? Your number of stayers who's going to remain in the program over that reporting period, and if you have children in there, they're going to separate them. Reason being is that the performance measures are calculated for anyone in a program over the age of 18. So it's going to separate out the kids so you can know how many adults are included in the data. It'll show you the total number of veterans that you served during the reporting period, the total number of chronic homeless on the report for the reporting period, any youth under the age of 25, any parent and youth under the age of 25, and then how many adult head households that you have, If you have any child or unknown age households, it'll show you that as well. And then the number of adult households and adult stays in the project, 365 days or more, which most PSH programs will have due to having clients that's been in the system, over time. Okay. So that's everybody that's included in question 5. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that's the right number of clients and so on and so forth, things of that nature. Question 6 is the data quality section of the performance report. So 6A is the personal identifiable information, which is, name, social, date of birth, race, ethnicity, and gender. If there's any information here, client doesn't know, not answered or what have you, information missing, there'll be numbers here. If you click on a number, it would bring up the name of the person so you can see and go back and review that information. Sometimes if you have a name issue or date of birth issue, it's due to the name and date of birth data quality question that's right below where you enter the name and date of birth. If you don't have that question answered, it may show up as a data issue. So if you go there, like you see the client's name or you see the client's date of birth, you want to try to figure out why it's showing an error here, then that date of birth data quality or name data quality may not be answered, or it may have the wrong answer there. So you want to try to have this as close to 0 or 0 as as close as you can to get to 0 as possible. 6B is the universal data elements, which are veteran status, the project start date, relationship to head of household, the enrollment COC, which now should automatically populate based on where your project is set up, and then the disabling condition. So if you have a disabling condition error, once you enter the client, if you put yes at the top for the question, does a client have a disability, yes or no, then there should be a value in the sub-assessment for disability type, right? So if you put yes at the top, then you have a value at the bottom. One of those values in the sub-assessment needs to say yes. If it says yes and no, it's going to be an error. If it says no at the top and yes at the bottom, it's still going to be an error. Those two things have to match. Okay. So like the first one, you want to have that close to 0 as possible. Or zeros is even better. 6C is data quality for income and housing data quality. And that includes your destination, which would be anybody who has like no exit interview completed, unknown destination, client disappeared, any of that is going to show up here under information missing. You can click and see who that is. Make sure you have the right destination there to clear that. The income sources that start, which usually is the same issue as the disability error, which is that if you have yes for client receiving income, then one of the values in the sub-assessment has to say yes as well with a dollar amount. So if you say yes, then you need to put like a dollar amount and what income source it is needs to be set to yes. If you put no, then all of the values in the sub-assessment needs to say no as well. And then the income sources that exit is the same thing. So this one person that exited has some sort of discrepancy between the sub-assessment and the question of whether or not the client has income at exit. So you'd have to fix that. The income and sources at annual assessment, depending on when you run the report, you'll probably have somebody here. And what that does is, and this is a good way to tell who needs to have an update done, right? Because the clients in PSH, even if none of the information changes, have to have an annual assessment during or before their anniversary date. We usually use the day right before, like if the person's entry project start date was 2/27, we usually just use 2/26 for the current year that we're doing it in. It's the actual HUD guideline is plus or minus 30 days, but in the system, from the software perspective, one day before that actually always changes this. So in this situation here, there's 23 people that have been in the program more than a year and they don't have an annual assessment done. Before you do any of the other data elements or any of the performance pieces like your income and everything, you want to try to make sure that this is zero. Because none of these 23 clients' information are going to fill into the other tables where annual assessment is required. Okay. So if you had like 23 people that had an increase in income, you're not going to get credit for those 23 without the annual assessment. Even if you put the income in as an update earlier in the year, you still need to do an annual assessment on that time for that information to fill into the report. Okay. So if I'm looking at a report for someone, this is usually where I start, and I don't usually go any further until I clear up the annual assessments. Because I know like the rest of the report is going to be missing information without that filled in. Okay. 6D is chronic homeless data quality, which is all of the questions that determine the chronic homelessness of a client, which is all of that section right below the prior living situation. So the approximate date that this episode of homelessness started, how many months you've been homeless, how many times, that section is included here. So if you have a chronic homeless program, if you don't have all these questions answered, it's probably not going to populate that question correctly because it may be missing some information to determine if that person is chronically homeless or not. So this should be zero or close to it. And then we get to 6E, which is data quality timeliness, which is basically how long it took the staff member, case manager, etc., to enter this information into HMIS based on the project start date. So today is the 27th. If I logged in today and entered a client from last week, then it's going to put that client in the 7 to 10 day bracket based on what the or 4 to 6 based on what the time frame was. I know this is one of the unity measurements for ranking. Timeliness is one of the data elements that we cannot fix. So it's incumbent on the actual person to log in as soon as possible to enter the clients into the system on or around their project start date. 6F is for street outreach and emergency shelter. And this training was for PSH only, so we'll pass that up for right now and go to question 7A. So question 4 on the APR that's not included in the CSV file is actually the capacity based on these two questions, question 7 and question 8. So let's say your grant is supposed to have, let's say 100, since that's close to where we're at on this report. So let's say at any given time, you're supposed to have 100 clients in your program. The way HUD measures that is it looks at the last Wednesday in January, April, July, and October. So 4 different quarters of the year. And how many people you had on the last Wednesday of those 4 months. And then the number of households as well. So in this particular program, there would have been 102, 103, 103, 104, which would probably been over 100% if we had a 100 unit capacity. Now it takes that and it combines all of the people into the households here. So we have less households than people because we had a few kids and everything in there. So we had 114 households total and 113 that moved into housing. So we have one person that hasn't moved in yet, which could be the case depending on the day you're running a report. And then 8B is the actual number of households out of that 103, 104. So we would have 95 in January, 99 in April, 99 in July, and then we were totally full in October. So usually they'll flag a report if the utilization is too low or if it's like over 125%. So like if this number was like 150, then it may say, well, why you have so many people when it's only supposed to be 100? Well, maybe, you know, another agency or something transfers some people to you or what have you. So, but whatever's in in these sections and stuff should make sense based on what's going on at your particular program. So, uh, so that's how we have to manually key this part in to the report, but then it also basically gets validated by what's on this question 7 and question 8 in the actual CSV file that gets uploaded. Question 9 is for outreach, contacts, and engagements. Like I said, this is a PSH only one, so we won't cover this per se, but this is related to outreach, contacts, and engagements. 10A is gender, and with the new fiscal year report, there's the additional gender options as well as the different combinations because now clients can select more than one gender to identify as. And so all of those are incorporated here. And then 11 is age, just the age ranges. 12 is race and ethnicity. And now before race and ethnicity was two separate categories. Now those two have been combined into one, and clients can identify as more than one race or ethnicity. And so now this table has all the different combinations that the possible combinations that somebody could select, and all of those are now included in this table. Question 13 is physical and mental health conditions at start of the program. 13B1 is physical and mental health conditions at exit. 13C1 is the mental health conditions of the stairs in the program. And 13A2 is the number of conditions at start of the program. So if you have more than one condition. And 13B2 is the number of conditions at exit. 13C2 is the number of conditions for stairs in the program. So how many people ran the program and what number of conditions that they have. Question 14 is the history of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, or human trafficking, which essentially was the old, DV question that they've reworded. And 14B used to be where you fleeing domestic violence, and they've reworded that as well to the most recent experience of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, or human trafficking. So there's been rewording there on question 14. Question 15 is the prior living situation of the clients before they enter the program. And so it just breaks it down by homeless situations, institutional situations, temporary situations, and then there's the permanent situations. And I wanted to just make note because I know we have a lot of clients now that we've had some grants that's been consolidated. People transferring from one PSH program to another PSH program. And some of those projects were designed for chronic homelessness. If you have a client that transferred, you want to use rental by client with ongoing subsidy as the prior living situation. And it's not going to show up as a chronic homeless person on a report, but that's fine because we don't want to change this to anything that would make them homeless again, because it's going to show up as a return to homelessness. So if you get clients that transferred in from another PSH program, or they were consolidated, we want to keep that the same and just know that even if it doesn't equal the same number of chronic homeless your contract was supposed to serve, it's okay because technically they were chronic homeless at some point, but they shouldn't be on this report because you don't want to change the prior living situation back to homelessness. Okay. I just wanted to make note of that when we look at question 15. Question 16 is cash income ranges for clients that start annual assessment and at exit. 17 is the income sources for income at start, income at annual assessment, and income at exit. 18 is the client cash income category, earned other income category by start, annual assessment, and exit. So this just breaks down how many adults had one income, earned income, no income, both earned and other income. One thing I want to make note on question 18, okay? So there's two things to look at on question 18 before you look at your 19, which is the performance part of the report. There's a number of adults not yet required to have an annual assessment. Okay, that's 12. Those 12 people won't be included in any of your performance pieces because they haven't been in the program long enough. So even if you have a client, even if you have clients, Jessica, I'm gonna answer that when I finish. Even if you have clients that gain income during the year, they won't be reflected on a performance report until that client has either exited to a different program or matured into your program for at least a year where they require annual assessment. Okay. So if a client's entry date is July 1st and your report period ends June 30th, but that person had an increase in income in August, you probably won't see that person as in the income increase until next year's report, or if they exit earlier than a year from your program. Okay. So when you're trying to measure, like, if you're running a report and more people than what's showing up on question 19 have an increase, then they're probably not on the report. So you always want to make sure that if they're in this 12, then that's fine because they're not going to be part of the equation anyway. Now the second one, the number of adult stayers without required annual assessment, those are the people at the top in 6C. So like this group should be in question 19, but it won't include them until you do the annual assessment. Okay. So theoretically, this number should be 0. And you can have people here because all of your new intakes are going to be in this first number. But the second number should be 0 because if it's not 0, then your income performance won't be accurate or you won't get credit for the people that's included in this number until we fix the annual assessment. Okay. So that's question 18, which carries into question 19, which actually shows the performance measure of adults who gained or increased income from starting annual assessment and from start to exit. Okay. So this is the income table that the performance is graded on. And what happens is you get the total number of adults and then a percentage of how many of these adults received an increase in their income. So the top one is for earned income. Then there's the other income, which is like Social Security and fixed income. And then you have a total of both of those together, right? So if you have a separate earned income measure, so this 19 will be all of our clients that's actually working or have an increase in their employment wages. So you only get credit for the ones that have an increase, right? So there's 5 people here, if we're looking at this first chart, They have employment, but you won't get credit for this 5 because they have the same. You'll get credit for the 3 here and the 13 here. And I'm using like 4 or 5 different programs. So that's why I don't know why this is 19 and not 16, but this is since I got like 5 different aids on it, I'm not gonna worry about why it's not matching. But anyway, the 19 out of 73 adults. Okay. We have more adults in the program, but remember 12 of them didn't mature. Plus, we're missing the other 18 that didn't have an annual assessment. So they're not in here at all. So this 73 probably should be 91. And then so this 19 may be a different number as well. But this is who you get credit for. You get credit for the 19 out of 73. So this 30 would be, you would get credit for this 30 out of the 73. And then there's 46 total. And then that would be your percentage for your stairs. And then it's the same thing, the same charts for the levers, which is usually less people because you have less people exiting out of PSH during the year than you do people staying in the program with an annual assessment. When we calculate this, I usually just you add the 19 and a 2, and then the 73 and a 17. And so that would be my percentage for earned income, which is the combination of both of these. There used to be another 19A3 that manually just added all this up into a third chart, but they removed that chart for 19B. And so now you have to add them up yourself. So like if this was like a real program, I would say they have 46 and 9. So they have 54 people out of 90. And that would be my 50, that would be my whatever percentage that comes to would be my final percentage. So remember, you only get credit for the increases and you have to do the updated annual assessment in order to get that to pull into this report. 19B is disabling condition and income for adults that exit. This chart is there if you want to take a look at it. We haven't got any feedback on this yet, but that's what this one is for. How many people that have a condition and then have the income category. 20A is the type of non-cash benefit source. And so that's just anybody that has food stamps, WIC, TANF, etc. 20B is the number of non-cash benefit sources. So if it's a unity funded program, if they're measuring non-cash benefits, you're going to get credit for the people who exited with 1+ source. So if this was a real program, they had 17 total, then you would get credit for this 11 out of the 17 and whatever percentage that would be. If you thought everybody should have had a source when they left, then if you click on that 6, it'll tell you who's showing up without that, and you can go into the exit assessment and update their information to move them into this 1+ category. 21 is health insurance. And this shows that the insurance types from start, annual assessment, and exit. Unity's performance measure is 90 days, so the client needs to have insurance. You can't get that from this report. We would have to manually run that for you if you thought someone didn't have insurance already. But this works just like the other one, so it's only we're looking at this at annual assessment. Okay. So that's what the health insurance table looks like. 22A1 is the length of participation in the program, which is just based on the entry dates of the client. So this is just automatically calculated based on the entry dates. And 22B is the average and median length of participation for your levers and stairs. 22C is the length of time between project start date and housing move-in date. So it just shows you how many clients moved in less than 7 days, 8 to 14 days, 15 to 21 days, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the time between the project start date and whatever housing move-in date that you added for the client. You have to have an update done timestamped after the client's project start date, even if it's a person that's transferring and the date is the same. So do the intake in your program. If the person was being transferred today on 2/27, save the entry, then add an interim assessment and do an update for today's date as well. Just make sure it's a few minutes or hour or two later than the actual date that you saved the intake, and then put the move-in date in, and then they'll just show up here under 7 days or less. Also, if you have an update with the move-in date, but the update is after what the move-in date is, it may not populate this because the report's looking at the update date and not the move-in date. So whenever you add a move-in date to show your client is housed, you want to use the actual date of the move-in date, even if you got other stuff you want to update later or whatever. Or if it's been, let's say, things happen, people are busy, you might forget to put the update in today. And you want to go back like 2 weeks from now, and oh, I forgot to put, Cliff move-in date in. You go back to today's date with the update, even if you're doing it 2 weeks from now, and then that way it'll pick it up as the right time and not add another 2 weeks to the time that it took the person to move into their house. Okay, so this is the length of time for project start date and housing move-in date. 22E is the length of time prior to housing based on 3.917, which is the date homeless started, which is the question on the assessment that says the approximate date that this episode started. And I want to make mention that, it should be the episode that the current episode of homelessness, right? So if you have somebody that you're entering into the program, let's say the person was in PSH before, but they fell back into homelessness last summer, and one of the outreach teams engaged them, and now you're going to rehouse them again. The approximate start date for that person should be a 2023 date based on last summer and not the original time that they've been homeless. So if there's a date in the system, or if something is populated from, let's say they were originally homeless back in 2020, we don't want to put the 2020 date because that's the original date, but they've been housed since then. So the current approximate date should be the date of the episode that you're rehousing them for now. So if they fell back in homelessness last summer, then that date should have a last summer's date, not the original date. And so that's something that we're trying to look at just to make sure that this number is close. It's never going to be accurate, right? Because it's self-reported, and we're fine with that. But the approximate date homeless, the self-reported date is one of the system performance measures for the entire COCs. And like if the dates in there are, real big dates, then it's actually going to affect the entire continuum, because it's going to make it, our length of time homeless is going to be a lot longer than it should. So just thinking like the admin, I would be looking at these 72 people that's got these 731 days or more, just to make sure that they have been homeless that long, 3 or more years before they've been housed this first time. Okay. So that's 22E. 22F is a new question on the fiscal year 2024 report, which is the length of time between project and start date and housing move-in separated by race and ethnicity. So it's the same information, but it's just separated by race and ethnicity here. And the length of time based on the 3.917 date that we just talked about, that was separated by race and ethnicity as well. So those are two new questions that's been added since October 1st with the updated APR. So I don't have much to go on by that because, they just started collecting that. So, question 23 is your destinations based on the clients that's exiting the program. So you got your homeless situations, clients going back into homelessness. You have your institutional situations, foster care, hospital, jail, long-term nursing home, et cetera, et cetera. Your temporary destinations, which would be transitional, hotel, host home, stay and live with family or friends, temporary. Um, and then your permanent destinations, which, you know, staying with them with family, staying and live with friends, rental by client, and with no ongoing subsidy. And then you have your rental by client with ongoing housing subsidy, which we're going to talk about uh in relation to like moving on assistance. Okay. So you're going to get credit for everybody that's in this permanent part. And then there's in this report, there's 4 people that's deceased. They're gonna take them out of the measurement, right? No one's penalized or anything for someone passing away. So in this scenario, you're going to get credit for the 8 people at positive destinations out of 17 exits because it's subtracted in the 4, and that's what this total person exit excluded from the calculation. This is saying 2, so that's 4 here, and I think the residential one you in hospital. So it's like different categories they exclude from the measure because that's just based on the client's condition, right? So uh this one would be 73% because it's 8 people exiting to a permanent destination. Now, if you're transferring somebody to a different project or they're getting like a public housing voucher or ACV voucher or what have you, they should be in this client rental by client with ongoing housing subsidy. So, you know, now when you answer that question, it brings a separate box that asks what the subsidy type is. You have to have a value in that subsidy type. If you don't have a value in the subsidy type, the report is going to be kicked back, right? So there's not a section on question 23D, which is the new question for the housing subsidies. So this is all the subsidies that's in that drop down menu. Um, so in this scenario, there's 4 here, and there's 4 in 23C, which means everybody has a value. So we should be good if we were submitting this as an official report. If you run this report and you have like 10 under ongoing subsidy, and this is only like 6 or 7, then you know that there's 3 or 4 people that's missing this. Before October, anybody that should exit before October, they were supposed to populate that with a value. But we did get a few reports they got kicked back because they didn't have a value. A lot of it was like with household members or whatever, but I think that's been fixed. So if somebody tells you that the report got rejected because of a housing subsidy piece, just let us know and we'll figure out who it is and why it's not there. So that's question 23D. 23E is the exit destination type by race and ethnicity. This is new as well. And so it just separates the homeless situations, institutional, temporary, and permanent by race and ethnicity. 24B is what we're gonna do from the workflow standpoint, is moving on assistance provided to households in PSH. So there's a subsidized housing application, financial assistance, non-financial assistance for moving on, the housing referral and placement, and then the other. And then all the PSH clients remaining in the program on October 1st should have the sexual orientation of adults answered. So at the bottom of the intake assessment, there's a sexual orientation question. It's required for PSH. So all the adults should have this question answered. And then 24D is translation assistance if someone happens to need translation assistance and what language it is. So that's basically the main 24 questions. There's a section 25, which is only veterans. So if you have veterans in your program, it'll populate this for the veteran. So only if you have veterans. This is the same, some of the same data elements at the top, but just only have veterans, and that's why they only have one person in this in those tables. There's a section 26, which is for chronic homeless. Same thing. If you have people reported as chronic, it'll populate this section 26. If you don't have any chronic, there won't be anything down in these sections. It's the same, some of the same data pieces is just separated specifically for chronic. And section 27 is specifically for youth under 25, right? So if you have any head of households that's under 25, it'll populate this section here, but only if you have youth under the age of 25. So as long as questions 5 through 24 are correct, then it'll just auto populate 25, 26, and 27. So you don't really have to review any of that as long as the rest of it is together.
And you gotta stay consistent. And I said, you better keep your head. Well, I could wear a
I got distracted by that. So anybody have any questions about the main part of APR before we talk about the moving on piece? So Jessica, I saw your question in the chat about the expedited method to transition PSH clients into state PSH. Do you mean as it relates to like the actual state piece of it? Because if you do, then the answer is I don't know if there's an expedited process. But if you're talking about something from a data perspective, just let me know. You can put it in the chat if you need to clarify that. So the moving on assistance, let me see. I want to show you. Shakur, what's on my screen? Is it still Service Point?
Yeah, it's still Service Point.
All right. Uh, well, let's tell you what, let's leave that there for now. Okay, so in order to populate the moving on assistance table, you're going to have to use service transactions to populate the moving on assistance table. And service transactions hasn't been part of our regular workflow for a while for just regular HUD programs, permanent supportive housing programs. So I'm going to show you how to do it. And I'm going to shadow somebody that actually has a PSH program. And I'm going to pull a client up. It's not their client, it's just me. Okay, so client has been having using moving on assistance. This is a scenario I think actually Tiba told me about. So client is moving on, it's gonna have a ACV voucher, but they're gonna move to a different unit because since they're going from PSH voucher to ACV, the other unit will accept that voucher. So they're gonna move to a different apartment that'll accept the ACV voucher. And so we're using the moving on assistance to help them relocate and move and pay the last, let's say we're paying a deposit. So from that client's record, we're going to go to service transactions and you're going to add a service. Now there's a moving on assistance service provided chart that I was trying to share. But I think what we're gonna do, Shakol, is either send this out as part of the newsletter, and then we'll just put the actual document on the website for people to review. Because judging from the amount of people on this call, we're gonna have to show people how to do this again. So the client is moving. We're gonna show that we're gonna help him move. So we'll just use today's date, okay? And so there's a service part. Let's say we're gonna put moving services, okay? And then we're gonna press save and continue. Oh, why is that? Oh, it is after that, ain't it? Yeah. All right. Okay. So once we press save and continue, all the PSH programs should have this moving on assistance drop down menu. And so these selections are the same selections that's actually on the APR. So we're gonna press let's say we paid moving expenses. So you can do financial, and that's all you really need, right? Is you got to just save that. And so you can do this at any time, and it'll populate that question 24 for moving on assistance. So let's say that was for him to move. We want to do another one. We had to help him find a new unit. So we did the housing search. And then we would get the same moving on assistance piece. And then that would be the non-financial assistance for moving. So that's housing navigation, transitional support, etc. And then we would save that one. Okay. And then this person obviously is not going to be in the data because I'm I'm not in Samaritan program. But when we refresh the report and rerun it, it's not going to pop. I hope it don't populate the ones I just did. All right. And see, that'll populate this question here. Oh, that was 24. A little further, Cliff. You're almost there. There you go. So that'll populate this. Actually, I think it did because I don't think they had two people in here before. But anyway, so it'll populate this, and so that should be all of the people that you help with moving on assistance as they graduate out of the program. That's how you have to mark them down and document that to fill out this section, question 24 on the APR. So this is only required for PSHs, so I wanted to have a separate training to walk everybody through the service transaction. So the crosswalk just going to show you what original one to select in that drop down menu to get, so you can hit save and actually get to the moving on assistance drop down. And then that'll complete the APR. Just make sure you have your sexual orientation question answered for all the clients that's been in the program. And if your grant year is prior to October 1st, and you've had some people that got moving on assistance that graduated before that, they're going to be included on this report, whatever the next report is you submit. So you probably want to go back and do some of those, or do all of those rather, for them to populate the report. Now, are there any questions? Doesn't appear to be any questions.